In our last video, I told you something about freedom in the DNA of Christian humanism. And over the centuries in Western history, we see a grand epos of emancipation and liberation along the lines of Christian anthropology, of the Christian vision of man and woman. And for business, for the economy, freedom is essential. Without freedom, development becomes fictitious or at least unsustainable. Why? Well, because private property is a form of freedom, and without private property we wouldn't have the incentive to trade, to exchange. There would not be a free market. Innovation requires experimentation without fear of punishment. We need protection by patents in order to get our investment back. So freedom is really important for development and for our economic system. Darren Acemoglu and James Robinson, in their book The Narrow Corridor, have written a sequel to their earlier book Why Nations Fail. In Why Nations Fail, they explain the differences in prosperity among nations as one between inclusive institutions versus extractive institutions. Prosperous nations have inclusive institutions. Inclusive institutions spread political and economic power. Extractive institutions siphon off the prosperity that is created to some elites that take it away and don't spread it. In the book The Narrow Corridor, Acemoglu and Robinson describe this narrow corridor for economic development and prosperity that opens for all when the state is strong but limited. They call that the shackled Leviathan. And on the other hand, civil society is strong but disciplined under law. And they explain this with the image of a scissor that needs two blades. You can't have a scissor with just one blade. And so these two blades are in continuous tension with each other and in mutual growth. So the strong state is in tension with the strong civil society. And the mutual growth, they explain that with the so-called Red Queen effect. Remember, Alice in Wonderland runs against the Red Queen, and they run and run and run, and they don't get anywhere. And then Alice says, well, this is a strange country. In my country, when you run, you get somewhere. And the Red Queen answers, well, in this country, you have to run to stay where you are. And so both the state and society need to be in mutual growth. Acemoglu and Robinson, in their book, they show impressively that this narrow corridor has only opened lastingly in Europe. And they ask the question, why? And their answer is, well, it's a combination of the popular assemblies that existed in the Germanic tribes and the centralized institutions of the Roman Empire continued by the Catholic Church. So the popular assemblies represent society, and the centralized institutions deliver the state institutions. And they say, no, it's not Judeo-Christian values. That's not what created this. Because see the example of Byzantium that did not develop that narrow corridor. Now, I would like to respectfully disagree from this last point. There's one additional reason that we can add to the analysis of Acemoglu and Robinson, and that is Christian dualism. In the Gospel, Jesus says, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, give to God what belongs to God. This creates the conviction of two powers or two authorities. One is the state and the other is the church, society and faith. And because of this Christian dualism, countless clashes took place between the Pope and the Emperor, between spiritual authority and temporal power. And that's something which did not take place in Byzantium, or at least not to that degree, because there was a mix, a monism between the Emperor and the Church. And this These clashes left us with the conviction that civil government is limited by moral law. So in the West, this Christian dualism has left us with the conviction that civil government is limited by moral law. Faith in God is an anchor for freedom, also for economic freedom. A free market is a cultural and religious achievement. It is precious and fragile. It needs to be defended. Freedom requires virtues and the culture of work.